On this week's episode of the Autohaus podcast,
I made sure the flip phone was fully charged before we called.
This is the Autohaus podcast. Matt Panic, thanks for coming back, man.
Hey, thanks for having me.
One particular topic that we talked about way back before our first podcast was this secret SR5 Corolla you found just, wandering around.
Yeah, I think I talked about it a little bit the last time I was on. Just to recap for people that didn't hear it. I was out in Arizona, out in the desert. Just stopped in this small town, get some drinks and stuff. Turning around to get it back on the highway, I went through a neighborhood and just out of the corner of my eye, just caught the back of an 8.6 deep in a driveway. Ended up going back there later that day. Actually, I had to turn around to go back and talk to the person that owned it, this lady, Judy. And I left her my phone number, said, please contact me if you're interested in selling your car. And I think that was the point I was at the last time we talked about it.
So, bombshell, you ended up buying that car. I'm sure people have seen on the Instagram. That's the white coupe.
Right. So yeah, there's definitely a story behind that. So like I said, she never called me. And about 2 months later, my girlfriend, she knew that I really wanted this car. So she wrote Judy a letter, like a handwritten letter, right? We had her address because we had stopped by there. So please call. And then she did end up calling. She called my girlfriend and they arranged a deal on the phone. Judy said, oh, yeah, it's an old car, so I only want $500.
Of course, right?
And I guess my girlfriend said, no, it's okay. Like, we'll give you $700. That's fine. So then, of course, I'm losing my mind over this because, like, $700 for running and driving 8.6, like, come on, you can't beat that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so all excited. I get back to Judy, set up a time to go the next day, get my truck, go get a trailer and head out there. I show up, I had my friend Jimmy go with me, and we get to the town about an hour later, come around the corner, and there it is, front facing toward me. I see it, it's beautiful, pop-up headlights, coupe, exactly what I wanted, right? So my friend waits on the truck. I go knock on the door to make this deal, ready to take it, got the trailer and everything. And it turns out that Judy thought that we were talking about a different car that she had in her driveway.
Oh, man.
I don't even know what it was. It was some 70s American car. I don't even know what it was. It just said, yeah. And she said, oh, I'm sorry, I can't sell you the white car, which is the 8.6, because I drive it every day. Right? Super disappointed. Like at this point, I had already handed her the money and I had to take it back and leave.
Oh, man.
And I walked back to my truck and I'm so disappointed. Like I'm heartbroken, right? Like literally. It's been 10 years since I owned an 8.6 and I needed this one. So I would hate myself if I didn't go back and try, right?
Yeah.
So go back, knock on the door. Sorry to bother you. I know we already talked. I would feel bad if I left here without that car. So I'd like to make a deal with you. And her brother happened to be there. And one of her complaints was, I daily drive this car, but it doesn't have AC and the Arizona desert's very hot, right?
Mm-hmm.
And her brother says, well, do you have another car that maybe you know about that we can buy that has AC? And I said, sorry, I don't live out here, but I do have about $2,000 I can give you that would buy you many cars with working AC. And her brother kind of stopped her and just said $2,000, and his eyes kind of lit up. And like, to me, that's still a great deal, right? So I'm more than happy to pay this. And I didn't even have the cash on me. So I had to run around town, and it was like a Sunday, so I couldn't go into any banks or anything. And I had to run around town and find ATMs that would give me enough of this cash out of my various accounts that I could, go and buy this thing. And I made it happen after about 4 ATMs, and maybe I paid $20 in service fees or something, totally worth it. And left that day with the title, and now it's my daily driver.
I remember the day you called me out of the blue and just to tell me this story. And in my mind, like the excitement in your voice was like we were two kids in elementary school again. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah, man. Like I knew that you knew the story so far. And on my, I had to drive over an hour to go out there and get it. So on my way there, like it was like a, natural thing to give you a call and like give you the first update. Like, hey man, I'm actually getting it. It's happening.
Oh,
Because I know that the unmodified old lady 8.6 is impossible to find now. And it come to find out after I went and got the title transferred and everything, she owned it for over 20 years.
oh man.
So it's maybe like I'm the third owner of this car. And it was 100% stock when I got it.
So now that you've owned the car for a little bit, tell us a little bit about it. Like, do you know any of the backstory while Judy owned it? What is the car been like? What spec is it?
Okay, so I do know that it is an 86 SR5 coupe. It came factory manual. The odometer stopped working. It's funny, it's all nines right now. I don't know if that was coincidence or something got stuck in the Odo. I don't know. She did tell me that her husband used to drive it and he passed away and she couldn't get rid of the car. So she made it her daily driver after that, until I very convincingly got her to let go of it. And I'm hoping, after I get it in much better shape and get it repainted and stuff, I'm going to drive back out there and let her take a look at it. Because it seems like she was pretty attached to the car.
That's funny you mentioned she couldn't get rid of it, because that's totally opposite. That's got to be a regional thing, like where she lives, because I know, for example, the original owner of my Corolla, he said one thing that he got really sick of, or was actually presented like a big problem for him, was like too many people would like try to follow him and flag him down for that car.
Yeah, I think the only reason this is possible is because right now I'm in Arizona. And down here, like, nobody knows what an 8.6 is.
Oh, interesting.
And she lives way out in the desert in this little town, and it's very heavy on the like American cars like Camaros and Chargers and stuff like that. So, and I got the sense that no one had ever even asked her about the car. In fact, like I said earlier, there was that other American car in her driveway. So maybe she just assumed that I was there for that, because that's what's, popular at where she lived, right?
So when you say this car is totally stock, do you absolutely mean that? Like zero modifications to this thing?
Absolutely stock. And I got your typical folder of like service records, how much they paid for an oil change 10 years ago, this kind of thing.
Oh, man.
Right. And it was really well taken care of. I gave it a quick once over. And the next weekend after I bought it, my girlfriend and I bought a bike rack and put it on the back, and we took our bikes to San Diego. And I think that's 400-mile trip. And it was totally fine. No problems at all.
I think very shortly after you called me to tell me that you bought this car, I saw on your Instagram, like almost right after you bought the car, you put some wheels on it.
Yeah, I did. Actually, I guess we can talk about the little bit of modification I'm doing. Like, I'd feel terrible putting a roll cage in a car like this, or, ripping out the interior. So basically, I'm going to do light modification and just keep it as my street car, daily driver kind of thing. And yeah, the first thing I got a set of wheels. There's no stamping on the back, but I know that they're appliance mesh. And just from my measurements, they look to be about a 14/7 -20. So they sit very, very nice on an 8.6 with metal fenders. Aside from that, I've done lots of cleanup work, put new carpet, found some missing interior pieces, got a pretty cool Vertex steering wheel, new seats. I got lowering springs, not coilovers, just lowering springs, stock alignment and geometry and all that stuff. And yeah, I mean, it rides pretty nice. It's compared to the other cars I have, it's very comfortable and like has working heat, for example. The most recent thing I did to it is I put a subwoofer in it.
Oh, cool.
And I'll tell you, I'm like very happy to have a car with a subwoofer in it. Right, like it makes the Euro beat that much better.
Oh my God. So what is that like in 2020 to own and modify a Corolla that's, a unicorn, right? This stock Corolla that's essentially owned by, the original owner pretty much.
Well, I guess the first thing is I had to do not necessarily a tear down, but I had to go over the whole car and evaluate it, right? Because this was they didn't know what they had. It was a normal like daily driver car. It was just an old Corolla, right? So they didn't take care of certain things that like maybe everyone who's listening to this podcast would take care of, right? Like, take a look at all the bushings, or like the power steering pump was very noisy. So I just cut the belt, and now I'm working on getting, a new pump. Maybe I'll keep it manual. I don't know. Maybe I'll get a manual rack. It was so dirty from being out in the desert. I trashed the carpet, gone, had to put new carpet. Or like there was no rear view mirror. And when I say that, I don't mean it was missing, like someone took the whole thing off. The sun had rotted it to where it was disintegrated. And it was just like 50% of it was just gone. There just wasn't mirror there. And that happened to a lot of the plastic pieces in the car. Like say the C-pillar covers in the back.
Mm-hmm.
I touched them and they just disintegrated. So I'm still looking for those. If anyone wants to hit me up, that'd be cool. But yeah, once I went over the car, figured out everything that was kind of wrong with it and what I need to do to get it, in better shape. I had to do all that before I even thought about going crazy and buying lowering springs, right?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I got most of that done. It turns out because it's an Arizona car, there's not very much rust on it. Like the only rust I found was in the spare tire well in the back. Actually, when you were calling me, I was just pulling it back into my driveway to try to get a little, because the Corollas have that smell, right?
Oh yeah.
Like I took the seats out and steam cleaned them and put new carpet and just cleaned everything under. I actually, when I had it all gutted, I took my hose in my driveway and like hosed out the inside of the car. I pulled all the drain plugs in the floor. And even after doing that, it still has that 80s Toyota smell to it. And I think you know what I'm talking about.
No, I know exactly what you're referring to. And it's funny, I don't know if you've noticed, but like 80s and 90s Toyotas, I've noticed they all have that smell. Like we have a SW20 in the shop right now, and it's funny, like, because I used to have a Mark IV, and the interior of both cars look like, yeah, they're from the same era. And then I remember one of the first things, like getting into that MR2, I was like, wow, this is a very familiar smell.
Right, exactly. And like, I don't know if I can call that smell anything. Like, for example, like 20-year-old BMWs, they all smell like crayons. That's easy, right? But I don't know what I could call this smell. And it's weird because I've had so many cars like this. It's almost like comforting, like a little familiar,
No,
Or like if I smell tire smoke on the highway, I just think about drifting. I don't think about if there's an accident.
Oh man.
Right.
So speaking about drifting in 2020, I know one thing you wanted to talk about is where you've been this year and then who you've been able to drive with this year.
Yeah. So drifting in 2020, normally like an average year, I'll do 20 to like 25 drift events. Like I drive as much as possible. Right. This year, it's been a lot more challenging. I've been having to travel around. But one of the benefits of that is I get to meet a lot more people. And I guess we can start by talking about my visit to your shop.
Oh, okay, cool, man. Yeah. So give the listeners a little bit of background. Originally, way back, I know your brother Mark reached out first and was just told me on Instagram, like he doesn't follow too many people on Instagram, but he appreciates the work I've been doing. And I was like, oh, cool, man. I messaged him back that like, yeah, I've been following you since, 2010 on the first gen Celica forums. And he was like, oh no, that's not me. That's Little Panic. And I was like, oh man, there's two of you guys. And yeah, it all started from there, getting in contact with you. And you seem more willing than Mark, or may have more time than him to do stuff like this. And it ended up working out where you were going to pass through or come close to the Bay Area. And yeah, you came to visit us. So if you can talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So back in May, I went up to Portland to park the track up there to drift. And on the way back, I did have time to stop, and I came to visit you guys in Fremont. And Yeah, I had my friend Colton with me. Shout out to Colton, 6-speed soul, co-driving with me down there. And yeah, we showed up and you guys were already waiting for us. They had a bunch of cool cars hanging out. I unloaded my car and we went and drove around and made some videos and stuff. Believe it or not, Ezekiel let me do donuts in his car, which was like very satisfying and probably nerve-wracking for him.
No,
Um,
not at all, man.
yeah. And I got to meet all the guys at the shop. We threw my car on the lift, did a little walk around, did some corner waiting, which was pretty interesting because, just moving around the battery or something would change the way the car behaved.
Mhm.
And the corner weight was actually pretty off with just me in the car. But I always like having a passenger riding with me when I'm drifting. It's just a lot more fun, right? And when you're not doing competition drifting, like a little slower doesn't matter, right? So, and it's funny because we put a passenger in my car and the corner balance was like almost perfect. It was like 1% off. So I don't know if I like having more fun with someone in the car or if someone in the car makes my car more fun. What else did we do that day? Drove around, did the corner weight. How did it feel seeing your car do donuts and have someone else beat on it like that?
Oh, you know what? Honestly, for me, I didn't know you in person from before, but like I knew the level of driving skill and like how often you drive. So I was honestly okay with it. And then the other thing too is like I'm sorry, I don't want to like jock on you too hard, but we've said it before. Like I've followed you since the first gen Celica forum. So like again, this is like the Matt Panic who like I followed for the past, more than at least 10 years and finally get to see him. Like, am I not gonna let him drive my car and have fun?
I mean, I wouldn't impose that on you, but I do appreciate it. Like it was actually a lot of fun. And at first it surprised me because you had like grippy tires on it. And what I would normally do to just sort of like start sliding didn't quite work and I had to try again. So yeah, thanks for letting me, abuse it a little bit.
Oh yeah.
Hopefully not too much.
No. You're all good, of course. And then like I think I've told this story to a few people is like after we went back to the shop and like parked, you said something along the lines of like, hey man, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to go that hard on your car. And I kind of reiterated to you like, hey man, like the purpose of this car, I built it to drive. So, I mean, that's perfectly okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like, I often end up talking about this with people just, about Corollas and cars in general. It's like cars they have wheels so you drive them, Of course, I can appreciate a show car or something there's only one of them left in the world, right?
Mhm.
But for me, at least, if I build a beautiful car, I want to also drive it and make good use of it. Maybe this comes from me like spending time in Japan and like the whole Shinto idea of, everything has like a spirit. But I feel like my car is very happy when I'm driving on track, and it's getting used and like, getting some exercise, if that makes sense.
For me, I always look to a lot of Japanese track days. Those guys will take like one of one cars in the wet and take them to a full blown track day. And for me, I'll think like, well, those guys are totally doing it in the wet. So, I mean, there's no reason for us to be like, oh no, I'm not going to abuse my car, right?
Even if I do end up taking some damage, if it happens on track, I'm actually happy about it. The damage that would bother me would be something that happened in a parking lot or just, some normal type accident.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
You can fix a car. Cars are a lot tougher than people think.
I know one thing that I personally saw was like, I think normally just walking around, I noticed you're like a pretty like chill, like mellow guy. But once you got in my car and started driving, like I could see the driver Matt Panic come out. And I know one thing that intrigued you was actually the 6-speed in my Corolla.
Yeah, and that'd be the first thing I'd mention about your car. Someone asked, having that shorter gear, no, not shorter gear, but shorter ratio transmission going between gears. Like when you upshift, it drops you perfect down in the RPMs, like where you're still in torque for that motor. And it just made the 4AG like so much more fun and like so much more drivable. Oh, and doing donuts was really fun too. And actually a little weird because I'm not used to having like soft tires on a car that I'm doing donuts in, right? Especially like one with a 16 valve.
It's really cool that that Altezza 6-speed really suits that 4AG, and it's like almost driving with a different engine. That's probably not the right way to say it, but a more lively and engaging engine because you have the ratios to match.
Right. Well, if you look up the data on that transmission, what ASIN calls it was it a mid-duty 6-speed? Yeah. So to me, a mid-duty 6-speed, it just screams NA 4-cylinder,
Mm-hmm.
right? And NA 4-cylinders, all the ones I've driven, they're much happier at like mid to high RPM. You don't have that low end torque of like a boosted application, right? So that it almost feels like the J160 was designed for NA 4-cylinders. If it's a Beams or a 16 valve or 20 valve, I think it has the same effect on the way the car drives. And that is, like I said earlier, when you upshift, you don't drop down to 2,500 RPM or 3,000 RPM. If you upshift at redline, you're still at like 6,000. You're still in the fun zone, basically.
Hey, so I have something interesting to ask you now that we're talking about this. Do you have any sort of like purist mindset with Corollas, like engine, transmission, rear end swaps in these cars?
I don't know if it's like a Corolla specific point of view, but I really think that depends on what you will use the car for.
Mm.
For example, now I have this car that's my daily driver, and I'm perfectly happy with the 4AC that's in it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have this urge to swap it to a Beams just to have a Beams.
Mm-hmm.
Like the 4AC drives me around town. It drives me to San Diego. It does the job it's supposed to do, right? And yeah, like I said, I don't know if that's like a Toyota thing. I would do the same thing in my truck. My truck tows my car around just fine. I don't feel the need to put like a bigger V8 in it, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And for drifting, my Celica, it does really well with the Beams, and I've had it for almost 9 years now, and I don't change the platform because it does the job that I want it to do, right? So I hope that people can think about that and be more realistic with the way they tune their car. Like, I know that you concentrate a lot on suspension, and maybe suspension is going to help it do the job you need it to do better than overpowering it.
I'm glad you made that point because I do feel the same way. For me, it's what are you going to use the car for? So, engine swaps are so commonly talked about and so popular, especially now that the Corolla's so in the mainstream these days. For me, it's like, don't do an engine swap just because that's like the popular thing to do, right? And then same thing, some people have a purist mindset about like, oh, because it's a Toyota, only Toyota stuff should go in there. But for me, it's like, if this guy actually uses the car, like I'll give you like a personal example. Josh Roku said like way back in the day, he had like some 4-cylinder like turbo Ford engine in his Corolla because that's like, I think in his words, he was like, yeah, because I got circle track in my blood from being a Texan. And, I'm sure he was, doing competitive driving in that car. So for me, it's like, who cares, man? He's doing competitive driving in that car. Who cares what swap or what he's got in it?
Yeah, that's interesting that you say that, because thinking about it from a geographic standpoint, maybe the engine swap thing is important because we're in the US. And in the US, like swapping a bigger engine and having more power helps you at somewhere like the drag strip.
Mm.
And somewhere maybe like Japan, maybe it's not a Toyota purist thing. It's just that the culture around having more power it's not as prevalent over there.
Mm.
So I think that Joshi Roku was right on with that.
I'm really glad you brought up the regional thing because that's something I never thought about before. That is kind of ingrained in American culture, is like the biggest engine in the lightest car you can get, right?
Yeah, exactly. Where in other parts of the world, you hear people say, maybe in Ireland or the UK, like, why is everyone doing Beams? Like 20 valve is the best thing for this car.
Mm.
But if you look at the motorsports history in Europe, like drag racing is almost non-existent. It's all road racing and F1, right?
Yeah, that's right. So back to drifting in 2020. Besides coming to our shop, where are some other interesting places you've been, or where have some other interesting people you've driven with?
Something that occurred to me earlier today before our call was that I've been meeting a lot of people from Texas,
Oh, interesting.
but not in Texas. So I went to an event called the No Coast Drift Party in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And the first person I'll talk about that I met there, I think you know him. His name's John Yim.
Oh, cool. Oh, okay.
Yeah, he has the John Yim Special 8.6. And we were fortunate enough to line up together and like do some laps and drift together a little bit. And got to hang out later that night. This is a multi-day event. So, and it's funny, he has this like really cool trailer setup where they have like a stove and they're making noodles and like everyone's hanging out, like having a good time. So shout out to John Yim. It was really nice hanging out with you and your crew. You're a great driver. And yeah, I had a lot of fun meeting John and hanging out. At that same event, I met a couple of guys from Austin, Tyson and Juan, and they both have Honda powered 8.6s. And I got to drive with both of them, which was very interesting because we were just talking about engine swaps and none of us had 4AGs in our cars.
Yeah, that's right.
So it's interesting to see how the driving was very similar and predictable, like how to follow an 8.6. The engine change didn't matter so much. I think that the chassis kept things, basically the wheelbase kept things predictable about when they were going to transition or like what I had to do in front of them to let them follow me well. I already knew that, even though I don't drive with 8.6s with SRs in them. But John's car was no problem. I had never driven with him before. And we immediately went out there and had like pretty good tandems together. So that says something about the 8.6 chassis. Like even if you do swap it with whatever engine, if you know how to set it up well, it'll still be a predictable chassis.
Yeah, this past year when I had the opportunity to go to Texas and actually meet John in person, man, it was amazing because you could tell like he's been in it for a really long time and had a deep history in it. Of course, right? Because he ran like Formula D back in the early days. I mean, just as you did. And I know it's funny. Like one thing he was like, "Oh yeah, don't look. There's an SR in there. I'm really sorry about that."
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned history like that. Like John, he did the FD, and I did a little bit of Pro-Am back in the day. And there's kind of a joke among people like us that, the old timers out there, that now we're in Pro 3.
Oh,
and that's kind of a joke that Officer Dan made up. Like if you're an ex-competitive driver, you're Pro 3 now.
Oh man.
And most of the events I go to, there are a lot of Pro 3 guys. Okay, so a few weeks before this podcast, I was contacted by a good friend of mine, Dave Pratt, who runs Speed Academy. You might know him. And he let me know that one of his good friends owns an 8.6 and would like to talk to me about my axles. And I ended up getting in contact with a guy named Jackie Ding. I think you know him.
Maybe. I'm just kidding.
And I didn't know who Jackie was because he's a time attack driver. And he also owns an 8.6. So Dave put us in touch. And I ended up inviting Jackie to Tucson to come and drive with me. And he had been in LA for a time attack event. So on the way back to Chicago for him, he stopped here. And when we were talking, he thought that I meant just come to the track and like hang out and watch.
Oh, man.
But of course, I wouldn't put him through that side trip to make him come and watch someone drive. So when he got here, I gave him the keys to this Beams 8.6 that I have here. And I have my Celica, and we street drove those cars to the track. And Jackie doesn't really have drifting experience. And when we got there, we had the track to ourselves, first of all, which was great. So no pressure, take our time. And I got in the car with Jackie, and you could just tell that he has a lot of driving experience because he could link 3 or 4 turns like without much effort. Like he did a great job. And he only got better from there throughout the day. And that's not to say he was perfect, because sorry to embarrass you, Jackie, but the first lap out, he plowed off and went 4 wheels off straight into the dirt.
Oh man.
Which is fine. It happens. It happens to me occasionally. Like, drifting is that kind of thing, right? Especially in a car that you don't know very well. And yeah, he seemed like really excited by the challenge and like trying something new. And I went for a couple rides with him doing some grip driving in the same car, and that was interesting to me. And in talking to him, he was of the opinion that it might be fun for me to try grip driving. I don't know. So after driving throughout the day, it sort of came to my mind that how there's this internet score to settle, like drifting's not any slower, right? So Jackie and I talked a bit and decided that we would use my Celica and do a drift versus grip time attack.
Oh my God.
And we put lots of GoPros on the car, and Jackie should have his video out of that soon. I'm not going to tell you what happened, but and I don't know if the score has been settled necessarily, but it's definitely going to be interesting to watch.
On that note, it's interesting because a lot of guys who have a background in drifting end up being really good in grip drivings and like events like that, like time attack. Whereas I don't think it's as common the other way. Yeah, I've heard that guys that are used to, grip driving, it's tough for them to execute certain drift techniques just because they have a lot of there's a lot of stuff that's already muscle memory that's hard for them to let the car, for lack of a better word, like get loose and be in a controlled slide.
Right. And, it's funny, like Jackie and I were joking around in the pits about it. I was watching him drive the Beams 8.6, and, what you just called technique, I kind of teased him and told him it was bad habits.
Ooh. And
I apologized a little because maybe his new bad habits from drifting are going to get into his time attack. I hope not.
Oh, man. But yeah, that's something I've definitely have been hard-headed about in the past, but I've recently kind of had to realize that being able to control a uncontrolled experience in a car will really help you in your grip driving. And I think before I was so headstrong about I don't, what is this drifting thing? And this is not the way you drive, but completely opposite now for me. It's because you know how to control a car in the most uncontrolled circumstances, that'll help.
Yeah, it just comes down to experience. Like if you're in the back of my car slips out, it's I don't even think about it. It's just natural. I just counter steer and floor it and deal with it.
Yeah,
it's not a problem.
Yeah, exactly. And I think
but if I go into say the front straight at Musselman at the speeds that Jackie was driving my car, definitely go straight off understeer. Maybe trying both styles will make you a perfectly rounded driver. No situation will break your concentration, right?
Yeah, I completely agree with that as well. And so I know people locally or people who know me have in person have told me yeah, man, you need to get out and start drifting as much as you talk about it nowadays. So I know this is the part we talked about yesterday that you were kind of dreading, and I still I realize you're really humble, but I really respect that. But man, you and your brother with Panic Made and Panic Wire, such a big positive impact for the community, and without you guys really trying. Not that you don't put effort and heart into your products. It's I think you've said it to me so many times before, you guys don't purposely try to put your products or yourselves in the spotlight. It just kind of happens, and your customers and your supporters do it for you guys.
Well, I appreciate that. Ultimately the goal here is to get more cool cars out there running and keep the older cars alive, the ones that I care a lot about. And I think we talked before, I've told you the products that I make are products that I needed personally. So I think that if I need them, other people are going to need them, right? So, I've made a few things that I needed and they're working out well, and hopefully they're working out well for other people. Yeah, you're right. I was dreading this.
Oh,
what else do you want? Yeah, so can I just talk about the companies a little bit?
Sure, go ahead. Go right ahead.
All right, so something I don't think a lot of people realize is that Mark Panic and Matt Panic are two different people. It's a really easy mistake to make because we're identical twins. Like on the phone, we sound the same. We look the same. We have the same hobbies, drifting, old Toyotas, that kind of stuff. But yeah, he has his own company, Panic Wire, that has been around for, I think, 13 years now. And basically, our companies work together to, bring new products to help the community. And like I said, hopefully get more cool cars out there running and on the track.
One of the reasons I reached back out to you to do this podcast is that I've seen a couple people with the Panic axles already. So Andrew Goodluck, who runs a Good Luck League and typically is at Apple Valley Speedway, formerly Grange. And I saw one of his Instagram posts, he had your axles, and I got really excited. I was like, oh man, you can buy these already. So yeah, talk a little bit about what are the updates on the Panic made axles?
I guess the update I can give you is they're here. You can buy them now on panicmade.com. Time to get them made. I'm sure, as you know, everything together and to get it working and get a product out there takes a lot of time and a lot of money. So yeah, they're finally here. Sorry everyone for the long wait. It was longer than I expected for sure, but yeah, they're available.
I'm sure they are well worth the wait also. So again, I know we talked a little bit about it the last time we were on the podcast, but what variations do you make of these axles?
So I make the 4 OEM variations, the Zenki, Koki, Open, and LSD versions. There are small but important differences. And if you need help figuring out which one you need, of course, please email me. But yeah, they're designed to be an OE replacement. So whatever rear end you have, GTS rear end with aftermarket LSD or anything like that, you just know which one you got to order and it'll slide right in. You don't have to do any modifications.
So as a consumer, what would make me want to get your axles? Why not just, get some used axles secondhand for my Corolla?
Well, you just said it. Like, first of all, they're not 30 plus years old and most likely at least a little bit bent. So even if you have a stock car, you'll have a brand new, perfect straight axle. They are made out of an alloy that's much stronger than stock. I spent a year testing them on a Beams 8.6 with no issues.
So some updates on Panic Wire. What's going on with Mark?
So I guess the big update is his products are very, very popular right now, and he's staying incredibly busy. He's booked out through the rest of this year, which is a great thing. Each one of these is made by hand, and quality takes time. So I think it's worth the wait, and I appreciate everyone being patient. A new big project that he's working on, and you and Chris Van touched on it on episode 100, was the possibility of a 16-valve harness.
Oh wow, that's actually a shocker to me. I didn't realize that Mark was actually working on a plug-and-play 16-valve harness. That's actually a huge deal.
Right. So he is closer than ever. There are a couple of very important keys to the kingdom, and we have almost all of them now. Well, he has almost all of them now.
Nice.
Yeah, as Chris Van mentioned, there's a certain plug that goes near the ECU that was very difficult to get, and we could never find it, so Mark had it made.
Oh my God, wow.
Yep. I don't have a timeline on it, but it is closer than it has ever been. It is very much his intention to make that happen and make that a product. So please, just stay tuned and let us know if you're interested. That'll help move things along faster. So thanks.
I'm going to ask a bunch of questions about that 16-valve harness. Feel free to let me know if it's top secret, but...
Okay, I may or may not know the answer.
Okay,
so,
okay.
Yeah.
That's okay. Yeah. So 16-valve plug-and-play harness, will it plug into the factory computer, or will it only be compatible for Link?
Mark is working on different solutions. As you know, he focuses mostly on Link products. So obviously that's in the works. But he also realizes that there's a big market for restoration. And so that's also high on the list of considerations.
Yeah, one thing I want to touch on with timelines and being handmade. Well, I'm shocked to find out right now that it's just Mark by himself making these harnesses. I guess I wrongly assumed he at least had a one more dude helping him out, but I guess not. It's just Mark by himself. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. And that's him being more concerned with quality, right? Build quality, he can control everything, and he's very happy to do that. I think a lot of people assume that these are off-the-shelf products that are kept in stock, but like honestly, I'd say 90% of the people who buy Panic Wire products, they want some kind of customization or something added to the harness. And I think your last guest pointed out, if you build a harness and then you want to add in one wire, sometimes you have to tear the entire thing down and rewrap it.
Yeah, that's absolutely right.
So keeping these things on the shelf, it doesn't really make a lot of sense to serve our customers the best.
And again, to touch on timelines and being handmade, I mean, if the listeners just roll through the Panic Wire Instagram, so it's Mark Panic, there's a lot of really unique projects. I am shocked that Mark is willing to take on. I mean, just off the top of my head, 2J into a 1 Series BMW. There's that Starion that's getting a 1J in it. These are like completely oddball projects that I can't believe he's willing to take on and make custom one-off for every single application.
Right, and I'm glad that you brought that up. So through the web store at Panic Made, I handle most of the more popular things that Mark builds. For things like that you mentioned, I think he deals with the customers directly because they're so technical and the needs are so specific. Mm-hmm. Like, for example, someone put a beams in an S15 with all working dash controls and everything. That requires a lot more communication than just like a Beams Corolla, which is very common now. But of course, reach out to me through the web store or email, and I'll get some information and make sure that I'll do my best to help you get what you need.
Awesome. And I totally forgot to ask, can we expect any future products from yourself at Panic Made?
Yeah, I guess probably by the time this podcast goes on air, my new T-shirt will be out.
Oh, cool.
I'm making a special T-shirt for New Year's 2020 in recognition of how great of a year we've all had. I'm not going to give you all the details, but I mean, I think it's pretty cool, and hopefully everyone else does too. So I listen to pretty much every episode of your podcast, and anytime you ask if the interviewee has a question for you, sorry, I didn't think about that. No, I don't really have a question. Do you know the show Hot Ones? Have you seen that?
I'm familiar with it. I don't think I've watched the whole episode, but yeah, I'm familiar with it.
Right. So, they have some celebrities on, they make them eat hot wings and then answer ridiculous questions, right? So part of their show, they have a segment where they do a deep dive on their socials, and then they ask them questions about it. So okay. I took a cue from them, and that's what I did.
Awesome. Okay.
Okay. So one picture, you seem to be like partying with friends or something, and you have your shirt off.
Oh, man.
And I noticed you have your shirt off and you have a tattoo.
Okay.
And I didn't know you had a tattoo, and I'm wondering if you want to talk about that.
Which one? I have a few, actually. So I have a few small tattoos. Which one in particular are you talking about?
Well, the one I noticed, it looked like it was like on the lower right of your stomach.
Oh, okay. Sure. That one's not that big a deal.
Oh, do you have a big deal tattoo?
Do I have a big deal tattoo? Yeah, I'll keep that one a secret. I'm pretty sure I don't have pictures of that one, but yeah. So the one on my lower right on the stomach is that was my first one. I did that at somebody's house. Yeah, my old coworker back when I was at the dealer, he was a detailer, and I didn't realize that he was tattooing on the side. So yeah, my buddy Francisco. And it's actually the are you familiar with Gundam Wing at all?
Yeah, a little bit, sure.
Okay. Yeah, so they have a like a kind of like a spin-off, an OVA called Gundam Wing Endless Waltz, and there's my favorite Gundam, Gundam Heavy Arms. In that one he wears like a half clown mask. So because like I'm like super into anime, and especially like mecha anime, I got both sides of that clown mask as my first tattoo. So
Good story. I mean, at least it means something, right?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Like, I don't have any tattoos, and every time I think I want one, like 5 years later, I feel like I maybe wouldn't have wanted it. Like at one point, I wanted a Cressida tattoo, and no, I did not get that. I mean, maybe six tattoo, but who knows, right?
Do you know about the Corolla tattoo on my on the inside of my arm?
No,
Yeah, so if you look at I think the Annex Instagram, there should be somewhere in the photos a picture of me holding my arm up in front of my car. And
oh, so
yeah.
it's a picture of your car?
No, it's so T3 has this one shirt, the tortoise and the hare, where it's this Starlet and a Corolla with an N2 kit, and they're chasing each other. So I got that T-shirt design tattooed on the inside of my right arm.
Okay, so looking back through your socials, I found a picture of what it looks like to be maybe a 1996 Honda Accord, a white one.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you want to tell me about that car?
Yeah, so that was my very first car. I got that, I would say, the tail end of my senior year, and I was fortunate enough that was a gift from a family friend, and yeah, I think like to back up that story a little bit, I had done automotive technical school like concurrently while I was in high school, and yeah, I was doing really well. I actually got a scholarship from that automotive technical program, and like I had a pretty like rough patch in my childhood growing up with like just stuff at home and everything. So I think like my life was making a turn for the positive, and a lot of good things were happening. I was making a lot of good moves for myself. So I think getting that car as a gift, from that family friend was like a part of that. And let's see, I'm getting a little bit emotional thinking about it because, man, I haven't thought about that in a long time. That was man, more than at least like more than 10 years ago. So yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's kind of funny, but you might be happy to know that we have something in common with that Accord, and that is that's the car that I learned how to drive manual on.
Oh man, okay.
So without that mid 90s Accord, I wouldn't have drifting, or maybe I'd be drifting in automatic. Who knows?
Oh man. So I was so excited about that car because that's my first car, and so I took such a deep dive into that car. So I don't know how familiar you are with that CD5 Honda Accord, but like actually a lot of history with that thing. So like Honda ran that thing with a Mugen kit in touring car, and specifically with mine was a V6, which was only 2 years, 96, 97, and I mean, a lot of cool things. So like in that touring car from Honda in Japan, they took the V6 model and put a H22 because I forgot exactly what reason, but I mean, it made me really proud. Like, oh, that's like my car. That's the same one.
I mean, that's pretty much it for the questions I have.
Oh, okay.
And really, if you just want to like chat a bit, you can definitely take clips from that, just about anything.
Okay.
Not prepared questions. Like, for example, like today, I'm putting a new clutch in the Celica. Like at the event with Jackie Ding, my clutch started feeling a little bit weird. And I'm not blaming him or anything, but after that, started slipping a little bit in sixth gear, just when it was really loaded up. So I went ahead and just bought a new one. It's a ORC 309D. And I didn't rebuild it because the Beams 86 that I have here, that also has the ORC 309D. So I figured I can rebuild the one I take out and have it as a backup for both cars.
So why choose a multi-plate ORC clutch as opposed to, like a conventional single disc diaphragm clutch?
Well, for the reason I mentioned a minute ago, I really like that you can rebuild them. And also, one of the weak points of the Beams is that the factory flywheel it's made for a bigger car. So you want to have some more rotating mass coming off the line, right? Say from a stop sign. Like an Altezza is much heavier than, a Celica or an 8.6. So you need that heavy flywheel. But what it does is makes the response a lot slower. It revs up and down a lot slower. So basically that means it's less fun, right? And the ORC is a clutch and flywheel combination that the whole thing weighs less than just the stock flywheel. So yeah, you solve a lot of problems with one product, and it's actually pretty cheap compared to the other multi-plate clutches.
You make a good point, because I don't know, for the listeners who haven't ever seen a Beams Altezza flywheel, it's a dual mass, and that flywheel by itself, I want to say, is pushing 50 pounds, 40 pounds flywheel. Would you say that's about right?
I think it's 48 with the clutch on it.
Oh my God.
It's very, very heavy.
Yeah.
And I always recommend changing the flywheel before anything. Like, I know ITBs sound cool and you move a lot more air, but in my opinion, the best mod you can do to a Beams engine is get that flywheel out of there.
Yeah, I could not believe it. I remember when I did the flywheel in that Beams car and someone else was taking it to the recycle, he like picked it up thinking it was going to be light, and he was like, "Oh man, what's in here?"
Yeah, exactly.
You know, another thing on your visit that I wanted to mention is that Grant's car is running now. When you were here, I forgot why we couldn't drive it, but yeah, that 7A with that FRS trans is running now. So the next time you come back, you should really have a go at Grant's car, because it's as exciting as it sounds, like a 7AG with a cam in it with the FRS trans behind it.
Well, you know, you're going to be in trouble with him now.
Oh,
because you just invited me to drive his car.
Oh, shoot.
So thank you. I appreciate that. No, I'd love to try it. You know, I think it'd be very interesting, especially to compare next to your car, because they're essentially the same trans with a little bit different gearing inside.
And it's interesting you say that, because I thought the same thing, but they feel really different, which is really interesting.
Right. Well, for one, I guess his car probably has a reverse lockout. You know, it's very scary if you're, say, drifting in third gear and you go to throw it in second and you fall in that hole for reverse, like with the Altezza transmission, right?
How do you work around that? That's another question I want to ask.
Like I said earlier, for like 9 years, so I just got used to it.
You got used to it. How do you get used to it? Like when you jump into the gate and you can't go into second from 3-2, how do you? I don't understand. How do you get used to that?
I mean, I guess try to be very fast with my hands. I don't know. It doesn't happen really anymore. You know, I spend most of my time drifting in like third gear and then sometimes down to second gear, depending on the track. So like that 3-2 shift, I mean, I guess I have a lot of experience doing that one. But yeah, like the shift lockout thing is definitely something that especially people new to the swap should watch out for.
Yeah. So I'm pretty sure it's okay to say this, because Mr. John has already posted stories on the JSP Fab Instagram. But do you know John is working on a reverse lockout shifter kit for the J160?
Yeah, I do know about that, and I actually commented that I would totally buy it.
Oh yeah.
So, John, please make it.
Oh,
I will buy it.
Yeah, plenty of us, especially with how popular Beams is. And it's interesting you brought this up, because listening to the episode with Nick Bay86, John was like, "Hey, I didn't realize like this lockout issue was such a big deal." And it is. It's just no one talks about it.
Yeah, well, you know, a lot of the guys on my team, we run Beams, and it's been a constant problem like forever. And yeah, I know that we'd like to see that fixed. My teammate Paul actually sort of made a prototype kind of version of that a couple years ago, and I think maybe him and John are talking about it. So yeah, there's definitely a market for that.
You know, the other thing that John and I have been talking about that I'd like your opinion on is, what would be a good next step as far as like a transmission swap for someone with a Corolla with a 4A in it? Because, I mean, it's just my opinion that T50 is almost not feasible anymore.
No, you can't find them.
Okay, I'm glad we agree.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I don't know if there's a transmission that's like that size, like a smaller transmission that doesn't require, you know, a lot of bolt-on parts or modifying your tunnel. I mean, I would be interested to find one anywhere, you know, from Europe or like a US car, like something of the same general size. Maybe 6-speed would be really cool. Like, I really like driving your car, but I think you're running the SQ kit. Is that right?
Yes, that's right.
So like that requires a lot of, I don't know what all you had to do to make it work. but it seems like it requires some massaging to get it in there and working right. Like something that would be like an easier, smaller alternative, especially for people who are staying 16 valve.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd love to know.
Yeah, there's a couple of things I've talked about with Mr. John. Like, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the old lean adapter where you had to take the bell housing off and put in this new billet center section. But, you know, an option like that, like 99% of people don't want to take a transmission apart like that.
No, I mean, it might be good business for you.
Oh,
like people will pay you to do it. Right. But yeah, I do remember the lean kit, and I remember it being a lot of work and very expensive. Yeah. And I think most people want something that's, you know, it doesn't have to be as easy as just bolting it on. I think most people, especially people who own Corollas, they're comfortable doing like a little bit of modification to any given part that they get. You know, it seems to be a common thing with us, right?
yeah, yeah.
But yeah, I think it's got to be somewhere in between a full bolt on and like the lean kit. Like that was just too much work, especially for the money.
Yeah. Recently, Seb from Modify Up, he put that FRS 6-speed behind, I'm going to forget what engine it is, but and he made an adapter plate. So not like the impulse adapter where it's kind of like the lean kit. You got to take the trans apart and put in this big center section. So he actually made an adapter plate, but I think the issue with that trans or the bell housing is the starter faces backwards the other way. So like, I know Seb was saying he's going to have to cut a hole in his body to fit that starter.
Yeah, I was going to say, imagine in the 8.6, there's not room for a starter on the tunnel side. That's the first thing I would have thought of, yeah.
And then you're right about finding a small enough transmission too, because I know Mr. John and I have talked about like the CD009 and then also like a T56 Magnum, but both those transmissions are giant, just about the size of a Corolla. So packaging becomes an issue too.
Yeah, I mean, maybe something like from the ND Miata. I don't know if that uses the same ASIN trans as the Altezza and the FRS. I'm not sure. I mean, that would make sense to me if that's what they use. But maybe there's another option there.
Yeah, I mean, part of the reason I wanted to talk about this so that it's on the podcast, because there's someone out there who can get us closer to the answer, because I'm not sure what the answer is right now. But, you know, anything that can keep these cars on the road and like have another option for us, right? So you're not, I mean, the most common thing I hear is like people are driving around with busted T50s right now because there really is no, you know, ideal option for them right now.
Yeah, I mean, I wish I had the answer too, you know, and maybe I will. Maybe, you know, this SR5 that I have now, when it stops running well, I'll have to figure something out. Maybe that's a good opportunity, right? At least to get closer.
Speaking of that SR5, what are your future plans for that thing?
Well, right now it's a perfectly running and driving daily driver, so that's my future plan for it. As far as modification goes, I guess I'm gonna give it to a paint and body guy. You know, I really like to do everything myself, but paint and body is one thing that I don't mind paying for. It takes many years to get good at it, and yeah, get some different bumpers maybe, and yeah, get it straightened out and repainted. It only has dings. There's no major damage on the car, so it shouldn't be a big ordeal to make it look perfect. I also did some tinted windows, which is very like period correct. Or like when I was in high school in the 90s, you know, you had tinted windows, lowering springs, and a subwoofer.
Oh man!
And now that's what I have.
now that you brought it up, yeah, that was exactly the 90s thing to do.
Yeah, or I've been going around collecting from friends. I've had some people nice enough to give me the parts I need. Like I got a center console and the little flip down cup holders still in it.
Oh no way!
With the flip top.
Oh man!
Yeah, someone gave me that. So I'm very excited about that. And it takes me back to when I first started getting into like Japanese cars and drifting. Like the smallest thing is like really exciting, right?
Yeah.
Like I got the little climate bezel with like the blue and red, like the little, you know, it has the writing and everything on it where the climate control is. I got a brand new one.
Oh man.
And I stuck that on and it just like made the interior look like so much better. Right? It's like such a small thing is so exciting, but you know, I'm at a drift event and if I'm not doing tandem, I'm like waiting in line and I'm kind of bored. like yawning, but I get excited over a little interior piece now. I don't know. It's actually a lot of fun for me to have this car and like just do small things to it and, drive it around every day. One car that I didn't mention from the BG visit that I probably should is, I think his name is it RJ or JR?
The
Starlet.
Yeah, RJ's car. Yeah.
Yeah. So I met RJ with the Starlet at Battle Garage, and that thing was very, very impressive. It just had like the coolest look to it, and it had all kinds of, I don't get to look at a whole lot of Starlets, and that thing was built, and it seemed like it was built with a lot of passion, and it was built right. So shout out to RJ. Nice meeting you. Maybe I'll see you again. And yeah, I just want to give a huge shout out to Grant at Battle Garage for letting me stop by and drive a couple cars and hang out. It was really interesting to hear his thoughts on corner balancing and suspension setups. So thank you, Grant. Really appreciate you. Yeah, because it was really nice, man. Like, not anybody's going to clear their lift for you and like give you beer.
Oh,
right? Yeah, so Ezekiel, like, thanks for having me on. It's always a good time talking to you. I really appreciate your insight on a lot of different topics, and it's just a lot of fun, To anyone listening, if you want to know more about what we're doing or, what kind of products I have or have coming up, Instagram is @panicmade, and you can visit panicmade.com.
And yeah, man, I just want to thank you so much again for everything. Like, just like our phone conversations, even off the podcast, are great. And yeah, man, thanks for being willing to talk again on the podcast. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, and thanks for having me. And, thank you to you for making more aware or spreading awareness about, 8.6s and old Toyotas in general.
Oh,
like the whole reason that I do what I do is because I care about these things. And, it's nice to know that other people do too.
So where else can we expect you at the next drift event?
So the next big drift event that I'm going to go to is the Showdown 3 at Musselman Honda Circuit in Tucson. And that's on February 13th and 14th. And we're going to have some special guests coming from out of town, some 8.6 guys. I think you might know at squeeze.86. He's going to be down here for that. So, of course, social distance, and hopefully we can say hi to some of you guys. All right, see you there.
That's it for this week's episode. If you like what you've heard, please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And please leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, as reviews really help support us. You can do it straight from your desktop. Don't even need an Apple device. This is Autohaus Z. Thanks for all the support, you guys.